It now gives me great pleasure to call upon Mr. Carl Wocke to address us on detecting fraud with data analytics and criminal investigations. Can you put your hands together?
Thank you, General. Very kind introduction. Sounds like it was written by ChatGPT. Which it wasn't, but yeah, I think there was a time when I was the youngest in the room. I sort of feel like I'm the oldest in the room. So youngest in the room talking AI sort of at the turn of the century. And now very much I'm mostly the oldest person in the room still talking AI. So today I'm going to take you on a bit of a sort of journey into AI. I think you all AI'd out. I think everyone's tired of it. But I think the perspectives that I'll share, hopefully, you know, there will be something useful in terms of the takeaways. Just for my wife, that she knows if she sees this, there's actually people standing, sweetie, which means just that she knows someone did come. So the approach that I'm going to suggest is, what do we do, you know, in terms of AI, the technologies? How do we fight fraud more effectively using AI approaches? So I'm going to, it's very small, my eyes are really struggling. So I'm going to take you on a journey. I'm going to talk to you about a viable approach. I'm going to talk about collaboration. I'm going to talk to you about a thing called a digital twin. I'm going to speak about your relevance, and then I just want to disclose some of the things that we are doing. So I think the important thing, on my way here this morning in the Gautrain, I actually thought of an image. The image is, you know, imagine early man, where early man would get together and talk about hunting and defense. And imagine how it would have turned out if early man literally just met and spoke about things, but they didn't collaborate. So in that sort of kinetic, physical world, imagine how we would have turned out if we didn't actually physically get together and fight and hunt as a collective. And I think what's very important is we now live in a digital world, and you need to find ways not just to talk about you know, the attacks and the hunts that you go on, but to actually collaborate. So what I'm seeing out there is that we're not collaborating as effectively as what we could. So to the first point, a viable approach, I would certainly like to suggest, and I think it's defendable, that we're not necessarily winning this war. When you look at the numbers out there, when you look at the fight against things like financial crime, the numbers just keep on getting bigger and bigger. And so I'd like to suggest, you know, at the risk of being thrown out, that we're not winning. The need for collaboration when facing shared risk, I spoke about that. I'm going to talk about that and justify different approaches. I'll talk about how one can do that practically. And then a very important question that you would have is, are you still relevant? You know, we all hear that we're going to be out of jobs, AI is going to take over everything. I think if you really want to get depressed, sit and contemplate what AI could mean. However, I do believe that you're still relevant. So I'd like to, that as a takeaway today, is, are we still relevant? A very important concept to think about. And then in terms of disclosure, as the General mentioned, I am in an AI company. Everything that we're going to speak about today has been built. I'm certainly not here promoting our technology, but the things we're speaking about today are real. The approaches are real, so that's very important. So how many of you, and I actually did this once in Australia, I said, how many of you have not put up your hands today? And a lot of people put up their hands, and I said, well, you have now. So I won't do that. What's very important, I would actually ask the question, you know, how many of you feel you're going to wait and see what happens in AI? You know, there's nothing urgent. Let's see how things go. I don't need to be an early adopter. The reality is you might not be interested in AI, but it certainly is interested in you. So I think that's a key takeaway as well, is that you cannot afford not to have a position on AI. You're no longer an innocent bystander. You are involved. You're either going to be a victim or you're going to be a beneficiary. And that's a very important statement around our journey with AI going forward. If you look, I think ChatGPT came out in October 2022, and our world has changed. Everything has changed. I was speaking to my team last week about a thing called Nano Banana. I don't know if any of you have seen that. Go and Google Nano Banana. It's a AI imaging type system which can basically change me into Brad Pitt and get him to sound. My wife's going to like that. Get the speech to sound like him. So the truth around images has now been taken away. I can generate any image, any situation with anybody. So AI, a sort of key thing to think about is you are not able to stand back and wait. AI is very, very interested in you. So fraud's growing. And what is causing fraud to grow? So digital transformation, vulnerabilities, as organizations race to transform. So this is very important. So ChatGPT launches in October 2022. Suddenly you're racing. You have to start deploying these technologies. If you don't, you're going to get behind. So what that does is if you're transforming really, really quickly, you're going to do things, I suppose, a little less carefully, and errors start to creep in, vulnerabilities start to creep in. So most organizations today are actually deploying some form of AI technology, be it in automation, intelligent automation, be it in bots, sales bot, chat bot type things, knowledge repositories, etc. There's a form of AI being deployed. But with that, you generate vulnerabilities. So I think the reason for fraud growing, those vulnerabilities are also being exploited. So fraudsters, you can be sure somewhere, I suppose it's not as formalized as this, but these guys are meeting and talking about ways to attack us. They are not opportunists, in terms of their attitude. They are actively hunting you. And the challenge is that they have access to the same technologies you have, and to an extent, technologies beyond what you have. A lot of AI is being regulated, and that's a whole discussion on its own. But imagine going into a fight where you are sort of held back by regulation, and I think it's important, but your adversary has no regulation. They will bring anything to the fight. So it's sort of like taking a knife to a gunfight. So you can be very, very, very sure that this kind of collective thinking is happening on the wrong side of the table. So fraudsters have access to all the cool technologies that you guys see. Then the next component is around expert shortage. And that's a discussion that I'll talk you through in a moment. Expert shortage, when you're faced with risk, there's a reliance on domain expertise. So this is a very, very important thing to test, with yourself. When you're faced with uncertainty, be it financial, be it relationship, be it about careers, there's always value in going to a domain expert. We seek out domain expertise. So when you're looking at financial crime, why does financial crime exist? Because of uncertainty. We're unsure about this transaction. The challenge that AI, traditional AI technologies or any technologies have is that when you're in a fast-changing risk environment, so waiting for the flash to go off. It shocks me every time, sorry. Go away, no, I'm kidding. So when you're faced with risk and uncertainty, you have risk and uncertainty because you haven't got sufficient data to have figured something out. And we've got extensive experience in areas of uncertainty, and that's where your relevance is important. That's where your relevance lives. So a takeaway, and I'll just mention takeaway points because we go to lunch next. A takeaway point is that am I relevant in this AI landscape? And a very good way to understand where that relevance is where there's uncertainty. Where would I want to ask Carl something? Or, where would I want to ask a Malcolm something? I have a moment of uncertainty. I'm about to look at a new customer. I'm processing a transaction. I'm just not sure. Something doesn't feel right. That's where your relevance plays a role. So there's a shortage around expertise. So you'll find, in this room we've got domain expertise, out of all the different financial environments. There's a shortage around that skill. There's a need to mobilize that skill, but there's a shortage around that skill. So criminals, the last point which I've made already, criminals collaborate. So you'll see within the dark web, which is what one of our earlier speakers spoke about, you've got different levels. You've got stealing, you've got validating, you've got monetization. There's economies running there. You can go and buy packets of information that have been cleansed and verified. You can spend $150 and pick up a complete profile worth credit cards, etc. These are not opportunistic people who are waiting for you to make a mistake. They are actively coming after you using the technologies that you are trying to defend yourself with. And again, the point is that they are using it without any kind of regulatory framework. So AI today, you've all heard about hallucinations. So hallucinations are when AI says something that just doesn't make sense. It's illogical. So AI today has got certain limitations, and these are very much in terms of outputs. Training data is a challenge, so this is a deeply philosophical point I'm about to make. AI learns from data, and we've run out of data to feed our AI. So what happens is AI starts to learn from its own generated data, and it starts to develop a thing called an echo chamber, and that means it starts to learn from its own broken data potentially, which will skew some of the outputs. And again, that's a sort of a deeply academic technical discussion on its own. The point I'm making is the limitations around AI. When you look at hallucinations, training data, you're still important. What we've got to do is find out how can you collaborate and work with AI. Agentic AI, if you haven't started your AI journey or you haven't spent a lot of time looking in the AI space, I would strongly suggest that you go and look at or search a term called agentic AI. Agentic AI is essentially where you have a piece of AI that goes and fulfills a particular task. So if you were to KYC a customer, you can develop a piece of code, put it into an agentic framework, and it will go and do the different lookups, make key decisions, evolve its learning, self-heal, etc. So agentic AI is a sort of the next, certainly in my opinion, the next wave in AI. Go and immerse yourself in agentic and understand what it's about. And then the final point, which I'm very passionate about, it's the foundation of our entire business. It's pretty much all my useful work that I've ever done on this planet is around this, and it's about human in the loop. I certainly believe that people are critical and will stay critical in technology, high automation, AI environments. And the reason I say that is if we release ourselves, to the powers of AI, we are not able to do things like empathy, fairness of trade, spotting things, emerging risk, emerging syndicate type risk, that is not apparent in data, things that we still play a role in. If we don't approach AI by keeping human in the loop, you'll end up with a very sterilized, sterile type environment where you've got machines talking, and you will not have the ability to, actively and efficiently manage risk without keeping people involved. The last point, and it's not relevant to today really, but if you look at the future landscape, where organizations are going to compete, they're going to compete in things like fairness of trade. Fairness of trade is not the domain of an AI engine. It's us. It's how we deal with each other. And when you look at risk, the way that you as a risk practitioner, a fraud examiner approaches risk, you have nuanced understanding, you've got instinct that actually allows you to understand risk beyond necessarily just the technology approaches. So I think the very key takeaway, for me is please take it from here. I see a lot of the world, a lot of industries in that. You are very, very, very relevant, more so when controlling this AI beast. So are we still relevant? Done enough on that. You're relevant. Risk and uncertainty. AI learns from data. So when you look at risk, AI being a technique that you can deploy to mitigate risk, AI learns from data, but risk exists. And again, this is quite a philosophical point. Risk exists because we've got incomplete data. So I'll give you an example. So if you're trying to understand a catastrophic event like a rocket launch that didn't go well, you rely on experts to give you insights around a potential failure. If you rely on historical data, there aren't a lot of failures of rocket launches. You've got experts that are needed to pre-warn you about a catastrophic outcome. So any environment, it's a risk statement. I think you would want to know, why am I still relevant? Any environment where there's still uncertainty, we're about to onboard a customer, we're about to do a proposal, we're about to pay a supplier. Any area where you think, I'm not sure there is something potentially risky here, any area like that, that's where you're relevant. It's by definition, sort of the definition then of risk, incomplete data. The human brain, I love the human brain. I'd love to sort of believe that we'll never decode it. But the human brain is really good at pattern recognition. It fills gaps in data. That's what it does. You see things that no one else sees. So all of us have got friends that, are particularly adept at certain things. They see things, or they have got expertise that I don't have. They've got opinions that I don't have. So I think celebrating the individuality of us, being experts in different areas is very important as a foundation. I'm going to talk to you about how this can be used within AI in moments, if you're wondering. So situations with high risk have high reliance on experts. We are fortunate enough to do business with a number of our tier 1 banks, and in those environments, you'll see AI engines that manage transactions, they're monitoring transactions, and there's a moment where a transaction becomes what they refer to as an alert. That alert has got to be adjudicated by experts. And there is no bank on this planet that we know of that doesn't have this problem, where you've deployed these ultra technologies, you generate this thing called an alert. This alert is now going to be adjudicated. That is a bottleneck. And that is an area where you are highly relevant. But the bottleneck means that there are hundreds of thousands or hundreds of millions of these transactions globally that are alerted, and we need access to experts. I'm now going to talk, or in a couple of slides around how we can actually leverage that expertise into AI. So the expertise gap is there because there's a thing called data lag. I've mentioned that in terms of risk. Risk happens because we don't know sort of something as complete, so we don't understand something. And when you look at the nature of AI risk and criminal activity, these criminal elements and syndicates are constantly trying to find ways to outsmart you, do something new, do something you haven't seen before. So that results in what we refer to as a data lag. That means that something happens, and before we can validate it, we need enough examples of it, and that's the data lag. What happens with the human expert is they pick up on that data lag faster than what your AI or your data science technologies do. So each of you, and test yourselves, in your organizations, you've got people that are just instinctively good. They've got good gut feel. They've got an instinct about seeing something. They can spot a snake before anyone else does. That is an example of data lag happening, and then also the ability for the human brain to generate pattern recognition. And then intuition, gut feel. You know, it saddens me when we don't acknowledge intuition. You know, we live in a data age where if you don't see it in data, then it can't be true. I think our religion, you know, we believe in, you know, faith, and we believe in a higher power. We also need to take some of that faith and actually say, well, if that person is right, let's allow them to be right. They've been right before. It doesn't necessarily have to be evidenced in data. So, you know, the idea that we are paralyzed because you can't prove something in data is a very, very dangerous position to take. So we have a lack of experts. So what can we do about that? So in terms of the experts are about developing intuitive pattern recognition. So your experts are intelligence agents, so they're human-based AI agents of sorts. They apply contextual intelligence, and they leverage cross-domain knowledge. So what that means is your expert, over the course of working within a particular field, they're able to develop an understanding, an instinct about something. So the banking example, they'll develop an instinct that this transaction might be a money laundering transaction, it might be sort of a mule event taking place. They apply contextual intelligence, so they bring information from different areas, and then they leverage additional information from other sources. So what do we do about it? And I think this is the key. So up until now, I've said to you, AI is coming for you. You need to be involved in AI. You have a high reliance on human expertise to fight the risks that are coming along with AI that fraudsters are using. So the technology that exists now is a technology called a digital twin technology. Digital twins have been around since the 70s. This kind of digital twin has been around for the last 10 odd years. And what we are suggesting, or what I'm suggesting as an approach, as a more effective approach to fight fraud, is to use an AI technology, a digital twin technology, to clone your human experts. So that's sort of, when I used to speak about cloning and that used to be Dolly the sheep and things like that, and people run for the door. But I think the acceptable term now, if we can use AI to clone our human experts, could we end up in a better outcome, or with a better outcome? So amongst the audience, we've got, you know, key expertise. Imagine using an AI technology to capture that expertise and to make that expertise available anywhere, anytime. That's what's possible. So a very important moment in the presentation is around, am I relevant? Can that be useful? So are you relevant? I hope I've made the argument that you are massively, massively relevant. Can it be useful is what we're talking about now. So yes, it's useful because you can, if you want to play a role in a digital world, we can use an AI technology to clone your expertise. That's an asset that you will own, but it makes you relevant anywhere, anytime. So a digital twin is what we're speaking about today, is a proxy of you. Imagine having a digital version of you going out and resolving alerts within a banking environment. Or imagine a proxy of you going out and being involved in 1,000 payments to suppliers, you know, today, working for you. So a key message for me to you today is an approach that sees you collaborating with AI versus waiting to be a victim of AI. So the way that you would deploy a digital twin practically, I think that's important. You would identify critical decisions at process level. So let's talk procurement. So during the procurement process, you've got to agree the final disbursement, so the payment. And imagine an ability to have 5 of our top forensic auditors watching that transaction, validating that transaction, and at the point of payment, a digital version of you, a digital worker, makes that final, makes that final submission. So what happens practically is digital twins. You would identify expertise within your organization, any areas where you have risk, where there's potential negative outcomes. AI techniques now exist where AI, instead of learning from data, you sit in front of the AI. Imagine that. So you will teach the AI to be like you. I'm still relevant. Get the AI to actually interview you to a point where there's a digital version of you that can now play a role within the digital landscape. The problem with the digital landscape and the problem with relevance is that because you can only work 8, 9, 10 hours a day, the problem is that you can't keep up. You can maybe look at a handful of transactions or processes a day, but imagine if we use AI to remove the limitation around access to your attention. Imagine if you have the ability to read 1,000 banking alert transactions per second. The problem is limitation or the access to your decisioning. AI technology has the ability to remove that limitation. And again, to reinforce the point, if you don't get involved as a digital worker, you lose relevance. And that's a point where you would want to start worrying about your future and whether you have a job going forward. So the digital twin, just introducing you to the concepts of the digital twin, learns from you, not data. You have a conversation. A digital twin will learn to think exactly the way you do. So digital twin is deployed anywhere, anytime. What I really like about that approach is that, very often it's you versus the world. So here's a picture of one guy, and he's the good guy, hopefully, playing against a whole lot of bad guys. It's actually, you shouldn't have to face the risk alone. You actually should be able to draw on expertise from other digital twins. If you are digital, there's no reason why you can't form part of a bigger team to actually fight against common threat. So the power of collective intelligence, and I think this is sort of a message that I've been speaking about for many, many, many years. And the next two slides talk to this. So collective intelligence, if you break down intelligence sort of into simple components. So digital twins with individual protection, each institution's AI digital twins can provide expert fraud detection. So what's possible with AI techniques now is that if you're a forensic auditor, forensic expert, you are able to create a digital version of yourself, and you can then make that digital version of yourself available to your organization. Imagine that. So imagine you're a sort of someone who works in distressed risk or distressed sort of financial situations in your environment, in your organization. Imagine having the ability that a digital version of you can go and look at what happens at the KYC point, when you're onboarding customers. So I think as a digital version of yourself, you become mobile anywhere in the organization. This is critical. So, when you look at processes in an organization, they're cross-functional, they move across functions. Intelligence should also be shared at a cross-functional level. And then the second point is around shared intelligence. So imagine the ability to create environments where you share in the organization at a cross-functional level, but you also start to share outside of the organization with co-collaborators in terms of fighting risk. And then systemic resilience, so a network effect creates an intelligence ecosystem that evolves faster than the fraudster. So a project that we've worked on has been where we looked at a collective of 12,000 banks, and we proposed an approach where the banks would form this collective and share intelligence between the banks. So when you attack one bank in South America, as an example, you are going to be supported, or no, when I'm attacked as a bank in South America, I'll be supported by 12,000 banks around the world. So I think it goes back to my earlier statement that when you are looking to survive a digital world, this fast-changing, scary digital world, go back to the original statement where I said, if you are, having campfire discussions around how you protect your village or how you go hunting, but you never work collaboratively, then I think the outcome for you in a digital landscape is going to be dire. For all of us, we're all involved. So I think the sort of the critical way to approach this is that, and the previous speaker mentioned this as well, collaboration. How do we collaborate? Get digital. So this is a sort of a practical example of what a ecosystem could look like. Basically what you have, imagine a world where you've got the ability to draw on expertise from anywhere around the world. So this is sort of a small profile, it's my personal profile. But with this digital twin approach, I can draw on expertise from anywhere around the world. Imagine that. So imagine if, again, I'll use the bank as an example. Imagine if banks in South Africa are able to leverage expertise from law enforcement. To put you on the spot, General, sorry. But the ability to harness AI so that you've got the top forensics expertise out of a DPCI or Hawks type environment, that's possible. And I think if this is possible, we need to rethink the way we look at risk. Risk is not a fight that you have on your own. Risk is an obligation for you to beat the risk. It's an obligation for me to be involved with you beating that risk. And again, a takeaway for me, for you today, what's very important, is that this is possible. I've got 10 minutes left, sorry. So collective intelligence, and I think this is my final or second last slide. So a collective intelligence model, what is a practical example? So you identify threats. So imagine I'm ABC Bank. I see I'm being hit by a certain kind of threat. You basically build digital twin expertise around that. You pull the expertise through a trusted partner like an ACFE. You then distribute the intelligence as is needed. So the example where a bank in South America or a bank somewhere in Asia is being hit, and to the defense comes 12,000 banks or 50,000 banks plus law enforcement. And all of this has to happen instantaneously. And in a digital world, it's possible. And then continuous learning. How do you share learning? These events are wonderful, wonderful events. I just wish they were able to, happen more regularly and that the sharing could actually happen as a real-time activity. So the last slide, benefits of shared intelligence. Threat detection is faster, identification of new fraud patterns. So that speaks to the data lag challenge that we've got where, it's difficult to keep pace. I would imagine if we were to share war stories, the things that you would say, well, you can't believe what happened now. You can't believe how they, how the guys are starting to attack us now. What if a threat that happened, in Europe somewhere was actually modeled and able to help you defend that threat coming to Africa today? So resource efficiencies, I think very important to leverage the skills that you've got in your organization, the skills that you've got within industry players where you operate, and then the skills that you have from law enforcement as an example. Imagine the ability to leverage decision expertise from any source to fight the bad guys. So knowledge retention, I think what's important, and this is just from experience, we speak to a lot of organizations where the threat of lost knowledge, institutional knowledge is real. So the sad thing, and this was sort of where my journey with AI started, the sad thing is that, as you get older, I hope it's happening to me, you get cleverer, And when that skill leaves the organization, it's lost. And that's devastating. We see very large global organizations, that success hinges on a handful of people. Using AI techniques, you're able to capture that. And again, an important point about AI should not be about replacing. It should be about enhancing and scaling as well. So in the mundane space where, I might not need an Uber driver, replace the Uber driver, that's different to actually saying, I'm a threat detection specialist, I'm a cyber specialist, I'm a cyber crime expert. We should not use AI just to simply move you out the way, because that's when the risk comes. You can't just simply move these skills, especially your skills, out of the way. And then continuous protection, 24/7. The bad guys are mobilizing, their game is 24/7, doesn't sleep. They are mobilizing technologies that you are using against them.